Welcome back, everyone. I've got today Brian Smith, founder of UGGs. I think it's a brand a few of us have maybe heard of. I'm just kidding. It's a massive worldwide brand and success. I think pretty much, if not 90% of people listening today probably own a pair of UGGs. And yeah, Brian, I just really appreciate you making time to chat, brother.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And so I met Brian at a YPO event at this point, a little over a year ago. And I was just overwhelmed with your story because so many people, especially at like massive size brands, they give advice, but it's not really applicable for the solopreneur or someone who's looking to become an entrepreneur. And the way you were able to so clearly articulate from start to sale was just really inspiring. I thought it was just a great message for the audience. So maybe if you could you start there? Just like I know, if I'm not mistaken, you were an accountant, or you got an accounting degree, quit same day. Like, can you give us the rundown and any tidbits from just someone who is a, in the frame of someone's a solopreneur, small team, or wants to be an entrepreneur, like your story?
Sure. This is inspirational to any of those who are thinking of being an entrepreneur, because the bottom line is you just have to start. And as you said, I was an accountant I studied for 10 years. And the day I graduated in Australia, I quit because I hated accounting. And I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And it eventually came to me that like all the big trends of business were coming out of California, like Levi jeans and waterbeds and all the surf brands and the skate brands and things. So I determined I was going to go to California and find the next big thing to bring back to Australia. And it only took a couple of weeks, and I landed at LAX with my surfboard and my suitcase, and rented a little house in Santa Monica. And the first thing I did was go straight up to Malibu and surf, because I'd always dreamed of that. It was, Malibu is like my dream destination. So I spent about a month surfing up at Malibu. It was only about 20 miles north of Santa Monica. And I made a lot of friends, but I kept looking. I couldn't find the next big thing. And, the next 2 months, 3 months, I spent, still surfing, making a lot more friends. And it was now October, November, and the wind was getting cold and the water was chilly. And I remember after surfing, I was pulling on my sheepskin boots that I'd brought from Australia. And I just got covered in goosebumps. And I just thought, oh, shit, there are no sheepskin boots in America. And yet 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of footwear, sheepskin footwear. Wow. So I was with my buddy Doug, and I said, man, let's go into business, man. We've got to be instant millionaires, And like every entrepreneur has this dream when they hit on something, this is going to be big. That they all are enthused with the dream. So Doug and I called up, a bunch of factories in Australia, and we finally found one that would let us be the distributor. So we sent him down a couple of $100 and got 6 pairs of boots in as samples. And we went on the road. Doug was going to be the salesman, so he went on the road first, and he came back after a week, and he had about 150 business cards of every shoe retailer in Southern California, and not a single sale. And he said, man, they tell me I'm crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And it sounds logical, but really the climate in Australia is exactly the same as California. So that wasn't the answer, but it got us, like every entrepreneur, when you hit a wall, you have to think laterally, you have to pivot, you have to, do whatever it takes to get around the obstacle. And Doug and I were thinking, well, why do all my buddies up at Malibu think this is the best idea in the world? And it struck me that, oh my God, half of them have been down to Australia on their surf trips, and they bought 4 or 5 pairs of boots back for their buddies. So in the surf community, it was really well known. So Doug and I decided to regroup and go after the surf shops. And so he went out to the valley, and I went down the coast route. And I remember driving into the first stop was Con Surfboards, and I opened up this little sample bag, and I was terrified of sales. I got to tell you, I was an accountant, right? And I opened up this little bag of samples, and he goes, "Oh my God, Ugg boots! they're great. What are you doing with those? And I said, well, I'm thinking of importing them into America. Oh my God, you're going to be a hit. This is going to be fantastic. They're the best things in the world. And I packed up my bag and I walked out thinking, wow, this sales isn't that bad, I went to the next store and, Ugg boots, man. Yeah, my friends have got them. They rave about them. You're going to make a fortune. And this happened all the way down the coast, all the way down to Mexico. And Doug was getting the same in the valley, And so we regrouped and, it didn't occur to us that we hadn't asked for an order, We didn't have any product anyway. So, we were just doing research. But we were now going to be really big millionaires, So we raised, just luckily, a roommate overheard us talking about needing capital, and he had some friends at work who are investors. So we raised 20 grand, which today's money is about 80,000. And we sent 15 down to Australia and ordered 500 pairs of boots. Well, early December they arrived, and we picked them up from the customs and filled out the third bedroom of my little house in Santa Monica. And we loaded up our cars with huge duffel bags now full of all the product. And this time we had order pads. And I remember driving back down to Con Surfboards and opened up the big bag. And I said, okay, Ken, how many do you want? And he goes, oh, Brian, man, well done. But we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and flip-flops, and they're way too expensive for us. You should go to the shoe stores. You make a fortune. And I just went, oh, shit, And I went next door. Oh, Brian, well done. But we just sell surfboards and bikinis and, trunks. And this happened all the way down the coast, And so at the end of the week, Doug and I regrouped and we added up the orders for the year, or for the first season, and it was 28 pairs of boots, and it just happened to be exactly $1,000. And so that was like a real big disappointment to our entrepreneurial dreams.
Yeah, I guess I'll pause there because I think there's a couple lessons. One is, so many entrepreneurs I talk to starting out, they're an accountant or an engineer, and they're like, I don't do sales. I'm not a sales guy. And, right. Here you are, an accountant going door to door. And then, I think the adversity, or that kind of, I call it like the mom effect, where it's like, Mom, what do you think about my idea? And she's like, sweetie, it's amazing. And you're like, did you get someone to pull out a credit card? And I think there's just two insane lessons out of even just that very early on. And yes, I'm curious. So obviously it didn't stop there. Can you tell us more?
Well, years later, I figured out what had happened, and I wrote a book called The Birth of a Brand.
Beautiful.
And the theme of it is that you can't give birth to adults. Every entrepreneur starts out, like if you looked at the stock exchange page in the Wall Street Journal, every single one of those companies had to start with $1,000.
Yeah,
right.
Well said.
And so every company, you have the idea, the conception, the birth, which is buying 6 pairs of samples, was the birth of UGG. Gotcha. And then every business just lies there, and it's really frustrating. And there's no amount of feeding the baby or jiggling the cradle. It can't get up and go to college. An infant has to be an infant. But eventually it starts toddling, and that's when the first true believers are buying your product, and the magazines are starting to write articles about you, and you're starting to get a little bit of traction. And then that quickly leads into the youth phase, which is the best phase of every business, because you've got consistent ordering, production's working, accounting and billing, the warehouses, everyone's just clicking, and you can run a $20-30 million business in that phase. But if it's a really great product or a really great service, you're going to hit the teenage years.
Yep.
And you can remember, wanting to be in every party when you're a teenager, every party on the weekend. Well, in business, it's the same. You want to be in every mass retailer. You want to be in every major trade show, and you can just blow your company so fast by chasing that. So you got to get to where you put the controls in and become a little bit more conservative. So that was what I learned out of that 28 pair rush, that And then I had no idea at the time, but I was just heading into the infancy. Now I couldn't give up because I still had, 470 something pairs of boots in the
Right.
third bedroom. So I started doing swap meet. Doug got another job. He went away, and I started doing swap meets and street fairs. And the best thing I had going was my little van at Malibu. I had a Dodge van, and I had full of products. So after I finished surfing, I just stayed the whole day there and had this amazing repeat customer business from word of mouth. And the sales went to maybe about $5,000, for the finishing off the season.
Yeah.
So I got a summer job, and the next year, started out with an advertising campaign, and I got these models, a guy and a girl, and I posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea with, perfect hair and perfect clothing, and the boots were like the main thing in the ad, And I ran those ads, and the sales went to $10,000, and it was just so disappointing because it should have been way more than that.
Yep.
So I got another summer job, and then the next year I said, okay, I'm going to get better looking models and a more expensive photographer, and we posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea, and the sales did $20,000, and I decided after that I'm just going to give up. This is too hard.
How many years was it at this point, Brian?
This was the third year.
Yeah.
And so for the third summer, I got a job on a golf course. And I remember the first storm hit the coast of California in October, like it always does. And I got home totally wet, from this golf course job. And the answering machine was like 20, 30 messages from every one of my retailers going, oh man, we need boots immediately. Everyone's coming into the store asking for boots, And so I couldn't even go out of business, So I decided to, I delivered all the product, and then I thought, well, I better figure out what I'm doing wrong in advertising. So I had a beer with one of my surf shop owners, and I was telling this advertising story. He says, oh, shut up. And he calls out to these little 12, 13-year-old grommets, and they come out, they say, he says, what do you guys think of Ugg boots? And every one of them just went, oh man, those Uggs, they're so fake. Have you ever seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf. And instantly I realized I'm sending the wrong message to my target market, young kids. And I immediately realized how fake these ads were. So in pivoting again, I called up a buddy who was running a Scholastic Surf Association up in Orange County. And I said, Pete, do you have any young kids who want to, get sponsored, when they're going to turn pro? And he gave me two guys, Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. And instead of getting an expensive photographer, I just went surfing with them twice. I went to Black's Beach in La Jolla, and I went to Trestles up in San Onofre. And these walks are about a mile long, and they're fantastic surf when you get to the end, And so I just shot photos of us all walking to and from the beach, and I used one of those photos the next October in the Surfer magazine and Action Sports magazines, and the sales went to $220,000.
Holy shit!
And why? Because I figured out what it is that an advertisement has to have. You have to have emotion, and you have to have a relevance, and you have to have this feeling of, my God, I'd love to be in that photograph, And so I could imagine every little kid in America who reads Surf Magazine would want to be in that ad, and it really, really paid off.
Brian, you and I talked about this specifically after your talk, and it was just that getting real feedback from your target market. And it was just like, when the kids went, oh, you didn't go, oh, that sucks. Like it didn't hit you. Maybe it did. I don't know. But you took action with it, and you said, okay, how can I adjust or change? And I think so many of us in business don't look for that real raw feedback on what the heck's wrong with our product or what we can change in our marketing messaging, in your point. And I think between that massive lesson and then you get it, you talk about the infancy stage laying down there, make no mistake, everyone listening, you took massive action while the infancy stage, the business was there. It wasn't like you were just waiting and one day it's going to happen. And the guerrilla marketing scrappiness, especially a brand like Uggs, it's so easy to write off in your head, like, oh, they must have raised millions of dollars to start, or, oh, they must have been in, they must have been in Macy's overnight. And it's like, no, you literally sold out of your van for 3 years, and then you had a photographer that you invited surfing instead of a $50,000 photo shoot. And you know, now you're the overnight success. I'm using air quotes. Everyone just listening to audio. 3 years later, of making $250,000 in one ad. I think that's freaking incredible.
Yeah, that was a big change. And so I just, even though that was really, really successful for me, it was still nothing on the blip of, you know, footwear in America. You know?
Sure.
So I started. You know how that first $20,000 we raised, we thought, oh my God, that's more money than we'll ever need in the world. Well, when you start a business, you have no idea that success breeds a need for money, right? Everyone thinks, oh, I'll have money, but it's the opposite. The more successful you are, especially if it's fast, you suck money. So I had to buy those investors out and bring in bigger ones. And over the next couple of years, I bought another investor out and had to bring in bigger ones. And I finally got to the point where I've got these 3 new guys from Anaheim, and they're going to come in and fund the business. And Neil, Paul, and Joe. And the deal we made was that they would handle all the internal workings of the company. I would be on the road selling, which by now I really had come to love sales. All my customers were my buddies, you know.
Did you hear that, everyone? An accountant learned to love sales. So everyone listening that, I don't do that. I'm not the sales guy. You can learn to love it.
No, I did. It was great. But the other thing was we were all going to share the company 25% each, but I didn't get my 25% until I finished with this little trademark lawsuit with a company, UGGs, but I knew I'd win that one. So, you know, we moved all the product up to Anaheim into their building and took a weekend sorting it all out. And then, you know, the following Monday I said, okay, I'm going to go on the road in my new career. And I drove down Huntington Boulevard to Huntington Beach Surf and Sport. And I walked in, and Jeff, the owner, he says, hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business. I went, what? He said, yeah, I called an order in this morning, and they said you don't own the company anymore. I said, you're kidding me. They said that? And I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I went next door to the Shell gas station because it's, you know, this is before cell phones. And I called up Anaheim, and I said, Neil, what the hell are you telling people? He says, what do you mean? I said, you're telling him I don't own the company. He says, well, you don't. I said, yes, I do. You're my 3 new partners. And he goes, no, well, you don't get your stock until, you know, and I just hung the phone up. I drove straight back to San Diego to my house, and I pulled out the contract and I read it, and I went, oh, shit, you know, technically I don't own the company. And I just went into this huge depression, and for like 3 days, I didn't go out of the house. I didn't speak to anybody except my wife. And I was just moping about. I couldn't believe it. I'd seen myself as the head of this huge international, you know, footwear company one day, and now I didn't even own it. And so I think it was about the 3rd night, you know, I was lying on my back on the floor watching TV, and my wife was sitting up on the couch. And I remember the show finished. I clicked it off, and I rolled over onto my stomach, and then got up on my hands and knees, and I started crawling towards the bedroom. And my wife just looked at me and she said, you get up now and walk to bed like a man. She scared the shit out of me, you know? And like, as I was coming up, it was like coming out of a fog. And I thought, oh my God, there's so much more to life than this crappy little sheepskin company, you know? And that night I slept like a baby. And the next morning, you know, I got up, and I'm back to Mr. Positive, you know, and I started meditating and started thinking, okay, what can I do? Real estate, no. Business broker, maybe. Accountant, never. You know, and eventually I thought, you know, well, I've really come to love sales. So what can I sell? And I started thinking for a bit, and these goosebumps hit me again. And I thought, shit, Ugg boots, you know, I love selling Uggs. And so I went back to the guys at Anaheim, you know, I ate humble pie, and I said, look, I may never own this company, but I really want to get a pair of Ugg boots on everyone in America, you know. So So I just said, listen, do me a favor. Do not tell people I don't own the company, because I will, right? So they agreed to that. And I went back on the road, and, I was out there for a month seeing all my retailers, and I got back to Anaheim, and Neil handed me an envelope, and I opened it up. It's a check for $10,000. And he says, that's your commission. And that was the first money I'd ever pulled out of the company.
Wow. How big was the company at that point? How much?
6 years, and it was doing about 1.5 to 2 million.
Yeah, and first time you pulled out any money. What a hell of a lesson.
Yeah, huge lesson. Got back after the next month, and there's a check for 20 grand, and another check the next month, 20 grand. And I'm thinking, shit, this is pretty good. I'm out there. I'm not doing any shipping, any receiving, any ordering, any accounting, any warehouse. And I'm out there having a ball with all my buddies. I'm playing golf with them in the summer. Yeah. I'm surfing with them in the winter, and just filling in orders and making sure everyone is as successful as possible. And, I'm making all this money. And that is one of the main pieces of philosophy in my book, is that nearly always your most disappointing disappointments will become your greatest blessings.
Yeah.
And I know this because I speak from the stage a lot, and it doesn't matter if the audience is 300 or 2,000 people. I ask them, what if anything happened in the last 12 months that at the time you thought was the greatest disaster, and now you look back and think, thank God that happened. And every time, 80% of the people put their hands up.
I know I can. Yep.
It's a very, very common piece of philosophy. And that's one of the main, my book is all about philosophy on how to hang in there and turn negatives into positives, And so that's a really good one.
Well, 6 years, first cash out was $10,000. It's quite a lesson, especially for, my audience is generally 30 and younger. And with how quick the internet moves today, and people making money on cryptocurrency and all this stuff, it's a hell of a lesson, because they think starting a business, you should be a millionaire in 2 weeks. And then when they're not, a lot of people give up.
That's right. That's the infancy they fall into. And it takes a lot to get through that. But just to show how universal this principle is, I read Phil Knight's book called Shoe Dog, the founder of Nike.
Yes, I do.
And he mentioned his first 5 years sales. And would you believe that the first 5 years sales of UGG was greater than the first 5 years sales of Nike?
That's incredible. Holy shit.
Just goes to show that every company is not immune.
Yeah. Wow. And some of the best are not, have to start from that way, I think, in order to get to that level. I think there's some of that humility, and, I think a couple other lessons that I took away from even the last sentiments, and I love interjecting along the timeline, because it's freaking awesome. The disassociation from the business. It's like, for me, even that's a heck of a lesson to say there's more to life than my business or me as an owner, or what am I doing today in work or whatever like that. And for you to wake up and sleep like a baby after 3 days of crawling into a depression it's just such a sentiment I think I needed to hear now. I think most people listening probably need to hear right now when they're just on the treadmill. And just the low ego, I think is a huge takeaway so far. And then really one thing is that I'm interested to see, or for, the listeners, you and I have already talked in depth, but to hear going from, you going from owner to really, I don't know if you want to call it employee, but a salesperson, and just, I think, and this isn't to deter a lot of entrepreneurs, but a lot of people, it gets sold the dream of being an entrepreneur. And a lot of people, it's like called the E-Myth. I don't know if you've read that book, but
I have many times.
And you go into a salesperson, you're playing golf, you're enjoying life, you're getting taking cash out of the business, less stress, overhead. I know obviously that's not where the story ends here, but it's an interesting check-in for a lot of people to realize that you don't just drive around Lamborghinis within a month of starting a business. There's a lot of heartache, issues. And sometimes it is, I joke all the time with my team, I go, sometimes I'd rather be you than me, and
really.
You got to experience it. Yeah. Which is so funny. Okay. So now you're really an outside sales guy, making money through the business.
Yeah.
Still not owning it. It doesn't sound like. Let's keep rocking if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so for 3 years, I just loved being a sales rep, and, not only that, I was traveling all across the country, because now I'd built up a rep force of about 30 reps in all across the markets. And so I put up nearly $1 million frequent flyer miles in those 1 or 2 years, you know, just traveling with reps. So I had retailers all across the country that I knew, and all the sales reps, and after and I was making a lot of money, you know, just because of, you know, the volume was going up so much. And so after about 3 years, Neil had bought Paul and Joe out of the company. So he now owned 100% of it. And I'd been helping him out, even though it wasn't my job. I'd come in every Christmas into the warehouse and I'd ship boots and I'd do all the just menial crap. And he really got to like me. And so he finally said, okay, Brian, next week, come on in Wednesday. We're going to get the lawyers in and we're going to issue you 25% of stock, you know. And I was just like in heaven. It took 4 years to get there.
4 years, holy shit.
Right. And so it was the weekend before, you know, I'm driving around. Now I got a car phone, right? It's the size of a brick, but it's like super cool. And my wife calls up and she's crying and she goes, oh, Brian, Neil's just died. And I went, you're kidding me. And he'd been in a motocross race on a motorbike and had a massive heart attack, and they never revived him. And so I called up his widow and I said, look, I'll be up, you know, next, you know, Monday. And here I was, didn't own any of the business. She had never set foot inside the factory. She had no idea what was going on. And so I thought, oh shit, I'm going to have to keep this alive, you know, just to see what it's worth. So I promised her that I'd do everything I could to make it work. So, you know, I told all the reps that, you know, this had happened, but don't stop selling, right? And, you know, I called the manufacturer in Albany in Western Australia, and he was a little pissed because he you know, had 3-4 years really good cash flow with Neil, and he remembered back to when I was running the company. It wasn't that great, you know. And it was like the best of times and the worst of times. So the best was that I just brought in charcoal and black as the 2 new colors, and the reps were just on fire all across the country with these colors. And
who owned the business at this point, Brian? The widowed wife?
The widow did, yeah. And so the bad part was, though, that I'm taking the business plan around to everybody, you know, all the investment bankers and stuff, and they saw this nothing and a spike for September, October, November, and nothing. They weren't interested. The banks were saying, it's a fad. It'll never work. It'll never catch on. Well, you know, all across the country, and this is after 8 years, right? And you know, 4 or 5 million in sales we're doing, and the other thing, though, that right before Neil died, we went in and we bought new company cars, and we took out life insurance policies on each other, you know, just as a formality, and never expecting anything to happen. But so here I am. I went through probably the worst year of my life, you know, driving to Anaheim for a month. Then I started getting the train up every Monday and coming back Friday because I was spending 10 hours on the road all the time, you know. And I spent all, you know, April, May, June, July trying to get, you know, financing. And I'm calling up George, going, George, how's the production coming? You know, the sales are fantastic. And I'm blocking all these, you know, 5,000 and 10,000 pair orders down to the factory. And, well, how are you going to pay me? You know, and well, you know, and I said, how's the black? And saying, oh, I can't get the black skins, you know, and I just kept feeling I was getting, you know, pushed off. And so it got to, like, you know, July, and I thought, shit, I have to start delivering in September. And so I started thinking, if he's not going to come through, who else would be interested? So I started lateral thinking again, pivoting. It's all about entrepreneurial pivoting, you know?
Yes. And
I thought, okay, well, who would benefit from me being in business? And first I thought the big retailers, and they weren't interested. And then I thought, well, how about the tanneries? I mean, their business is selling sheepskin, and I'm a phenomenal outlet for that. So I sent a business plan to a couple of tanneries, and one called up and said, Brian, this is fantastic. Come on down, you know?
Yes.
So I flew to Melbourne, and I met him. We got a tour of the factory and the offices, and I got into his office, and there's a plaque on the desk that says, "I reserve the right to change my mind." And I just said, "Oh shit, what does that mean?" Well, we planned all day on how we were going to do this, and the next day he comes in and goes, "Oh, Brian, look, I'm really sorry that there's a lot of money here, and you're in LA, and I'm in Melbourne, and I just can't take the risk, And the next day he came in and said, "Oh, don't worry, I found someone in LA who can come in and look on over your shoulders, and let's get to planning again." So we planned numbers and manufacturers, and the next day he came in and said, "Oh, Brian, look, it's a family-owned business, and the rest of my family think it's a really bad idea." Yep. And so the bottom line is I left Melbourne without a deal.
Yeah.
And I got back to San Diego, and the first person I saw was my sales girl for California. She said, "Hey, Brian, there's a company out here called Thunderwear, and they're selling sheepskin boots, and they they said they're going to put UGG out of business." And I just, I pulled up the trade magazine and I looked up Thunderwear, and I said, "Shit, they're a windsurfing company. They make neoprene gloves and, booties." And I thought, what the hell are they doing? And I got bigger problems than them, right? So I threw it away. And so it got to be now September, and the first big trade show happens in Long Beach that kicks off the whole winter shipping and selling season. And so I thought, shit, should I be there? I mean, we have no product, but I wasn't ready to give up and be defeated. I wasn't defeated yet. Yeah. Right? I wasn't going to give up yet. And so I talked to my wife, and we decided to put a display up there with all last year's product in it. And we finished setting up the display, and then I thought, I wonder where those Thunderwear people are. So I got the trade map, and I looked, oh, they're in the back corner. So I walk over and I stopped like a couple of booths short, and I went, oh shit. There was all my black, all my charcoal,
the supplier,
all the normal colors that I had, but they had different labels on the label said Thugs. And I thought that was pretty appropriate.
Yes, it was.
Thunderwear Uggs is Thugs, And that's when I knew I'm beaten. I'm out of business. But I didn't tell anybody at the show. We just went ahead and kept selling orders like they were, no yesterday. And it was a record writing show for us. And my wife and I said, after we get back, we'll start calling all the customers and tell them to go buy Thugs, because it's all our product anyway.
Yeah. So supplier went over there, just for everyone listening.
Yeah, he just did an end run behind me and thought that they would be a better financial bet.
Yep.
So we pulled down the booth, and I went back to San Diego, and Sunday night, and it was late, real late, and I called up Gordon at the tannery, and I said, "Hey, Gordon, thanks for trying to help out, but George has done an end run, and my wife and I were just going to close the business down, for the year and figure out what to do." And we went to bed, and about 2:00 in the morning, the phone rings, and he says, "Brian, it's Gordon. Screw George. I'll get you all the product you need."
This is the supplier.
The tannery, yeah.
Oh, the tannery, yeah.
The tannery, and
the one that went behind your back, or no, or the one?
No. This is the tannery I've been talking to, but the one who changed his mind all the time.
Melbourne, yes, got it.
Yeah, and so George was in Western Australia. He says, "Screw George," And this is no handshake, no contract. I sent down all the patterns, and he duplicated them and sent them out to 4 or 5 manufacturers, and he cranked up his tannery to maximum production. And after a couple of weeks, I got 2,000 pairs on a Friday, and the next Friday, 5,000 pairs, and the next Friday, 5,000 pairs. And this happened all through October, November, and December, right? And we had to throw away maybe $1 million worth of orders that year, because we never did catch up.
Yes.
But the thing is, we were shipping product, and it wasn't great product, but it was product with UGG labels on the back,
Yes.
And then this weird thing happened between Christmas and New Year. Christmas, like, everything just stops dead. It's just grinds to it. The phones don't even ring in the office, And I was sitting there thinking, two things happened. One, that the insurance policy, the insurance brokers had called us up and sent it, they wanted us to go up to LA to talk about the policy. And anyway, they settled, and it was just enough money to buy the business 100% back from his widow, right? I had no cash left over.
The life insurance policy.
I owned 100% of this totally broke company, right? And the other weird thing is that my customs broker had screwed up, and he shipped 2,000 pairs of Thugs to me and 1,000 pairs of my Ugg boots up to Thugs, right? Thunderwear. And they were
1,000 extra.
They're in San Clemente, and I as much as I wanted to destroy his boots, I needed my 1,000 pairs even worse. So
yeah,
I called him up, and I went up, and we swapped them around. It's only an hour away. And as I was driving home, I was going through this big area called Camp Pendleton. It's a Marine base where there's no, build up, and it's very relaxing. And I started thinking, how come that I couldn't keep product in the warehouse for 24 hours. The retailers knew that it came in on Friday, and 5,000 pairs was gone Saturday lunchtime every week. How come we couldn't keep product in the warehouse? And the Thugs warehouse, which was way bigger than ours, was floor to ceiling full of sheepskin boots at Christmas. And that's when I realized that the loyalty of my customers was so powerful, not just in California, but all across the country, where I'd met the buyers and I'd worked with them 3 or 4 years in a row. I had friends all across the country, and they all just said, screw Thugs, we're going to go with Ugg, and we don't care if we lose, thousands of dollars in business, we're going to stick with Brian. And that was the testament to customer service.
Yes.
And we're in a world now where it's purchasing by a click and a quick research on a website, and there's very little interaction. But it's critical that even though you are in the internet world, you've got to reach out to your customers.
Yeah.
I've been working with a girl here as a mentor. She's got a lamb leather sash bag, and nobody gets a bag without a week later somebody from the office calls up and, hey, what do you think of it? How do you like it? And she's now got 60, 70,000 raving fans. She calls the Sash Sisterhood. So it is possible to do it in this age. You just got to set aside the time and and do it.
Well, to your point, I mean, it's the opportunity, right? Because people aren't doing that anymore, it's I always like to FaceTime with my clients, even if that is tech enabled, fly out there when I can, not, maybe not as much during COVID, but, send like some of my biggest customers. They love Yankees baseballs. I send them signed baseballs for Christmas, like anything. And these things, to your point, when you're in that, oh shit, I'm fucked moment, that's where that loyalty and friendship, it saves you.
I've got goosebumps just thinking of it right now. That's how powerful it is. Yeah.
If that's not the biggest nugget, I don't know what is. I mean, another thing you said that kind of skipped over, but it was fucking phenomenal, because so many entrepreneurs, including myself at time, get stuck wanting perfection out the door, right? Like until it's perfect, I can't release it to the world. This is mine. And you mentioned during that season when you were able to switch suppliers. And
it was horrible.
You said it was bad, but I mean, so Amazon has a leadership principle. It's called bias for action, and they have 13 leadership principles when higher. And it says speed matters in business. Many decisions and actions are reversible and do not need to be extensively studied. We value calculated risk taking, and that's what you did there, in my opinion. You did a calculated risk that paid off.
Yes, it just kept us alive, and it wasn't long before we got back to good quality again. But
of course,
starting factories from zero to maximum production is never going to get you the best quality.
100%. And that loyal customers is everything. So, if you could keep rocking that, and you have one story I'm excited for you to get to, where that customer service orientated, I believe, is what really shot through the moon. It was one of the things that stuck with me. We'll see if you say it on your own, or maybe I can pull it on without killing the punchline.
Okay. Well, before I get to that, I just want to, by now I'd realized that, I had this book of, philosophy. And one of the things I read was that the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day happily as a tadpole, right? And what I'd been doing was just plodding along, just not giving up. Like I could have given up when I found out that George did an end run. I could have given up, but something just said no, and so that the perseverance through that period just really did pay off.
Yeah.
But you're right. We had now a business that was really heavily in surf, really heavily in ski and snowboarding, and I'd figured out back east, for years it was a problem. What do the kids do here in the winter? I figured out they play hockey, and so every kid has to go to the hockey rink, change shoes, so Uggs are really good. The moms have to come and watch in these 40-degree rinks, so they want some warm footwear. So hockey became a huge outlet for us. And I used the same formula by getting these young pros into the magazines and driving this peer pressure through the kids. But we were doing about maybe 8 million, but it was all these niches and we didn't have any big overarching image for the product. So I came up with casual comfort, right? And this is from now on, this is what we're going to push, casual comfort. And my dream was to get on the front, the main page of the lifestyle section of USA Today, right?
Yes.
That would be national, right? And so I spent a couple of months and maybe $30,000 with this PR agency in Boston, and we developed the press kit and we developed the whole plan to go out and do interviews all across the country. And I had already made an appointment with Nancy from USA Today. She was the fashion editor at USA Today, right? And it was for a Wednesday. And so we started our little thing. We practiced in New York and, Connecticut and worked our way across to Chicago to USA Today. And we got there on the Wednesday and got there at 5 to 3. And Nancy comes running out and goes, "Oh, Brian, I made a huge mistake. I've double booked. I've only got 5 minutes, And I just thought, oh, shit. I had this 45-minute presentation perfected, right? So I had to think laterally again.
Yes.
And I just reached down into my briefcase and I pulled out this tatty old folder that I'd had for like 15 years, but it was full of photos of, celebrities, and I had, Patrick Swayze and Neil Young and Sting and, all these, and I get through to, Brooke Shields and there was one with Pamela Anderson on the beach, wearing a red swimsuit. And I flicked by that because, that's not how you wear Uggs. And I go to Heather Locklear and she says, go back. Who is that? And she pulls out this tabloid thing someone had sent me from London. It was Pamela Anderson, wearing Uggs on the beach with a script in her hand, right? And she wrote down the name of the photographer and the name of the magazine. And she said, "Do you have a press kit?" "Yep, got to go," like 4 minutes, right? And I just looked at the girl from the PR agency, we just totally blew, $40,000, And so the next day I was in Chicago airport, got my coffee and I picked up USA Today and I'm expecting nothing. Like that was like yesterday, right? And I open up the main section and the money section. I get to the lifestyle section and here's a photo of Pamela Anderson wearing these Ugg boots. And then you open up the second page and she must have stayed up all night writing this because there was information in there that I never got told her, And what really pissed me off, she had all of my competitors listed. Oh. And I thought, oh my God, I've done all this work and now there are all these competitors, And so I got back to the office in San Diego that afternoon and I found that the phones had not stopped ringing from consumers wanting to know where there's a store in their area and retailers wanting to know how the hell do they get the product, And so that was a real hit. And then, believe it or not, I'd been trying to get into all these really big mall stores, the really high-end retailers, the Saks, the Nordstroms and all those, and I just kept getting blown off. Well, because she listed all these competitors, these big retailers started calling me because the reason they wouldn't take me at first was I'm just an item, right?
Yes.
But now there's a category called sheepskin boots, and I'm the leader of the category. So now all these big stores are calling me and trying to, get it. So even that negative turned into a positive. That disaster turned into a great blessing. And so that was when the company really, really started to take on traction.
Yeah, that's incredible. I liked how you went from niche to actually literally, I was going to say mass market, but creating your own category. A lot of businesses, I think, they're like, who's your customer? Everyone. Yeah. And I think you may or may not agree. It's tough, specifically at first, to have the critical mass to sell to everyone versus you just surfers and then just hockey and then
you can't give birth to adults, man. You have to find your little crowd first.
Yes.
100%. And let them double, and then let them double, and then let them double, and then let it. It just comes. That's the tadpole theory.
Yeah, I love it. And Ryan, could you talk a little bit about, you had a story where somebody called you, I'll see if you pick it up before I put out the punchline on it, but where somebody called and last minute you shipped some stuff and then it ended up really on a big in the hands of the right person.
Yeah. Okay. I know.
I love it. You know what I'm talking about? I just thought that was the coolest story as far as over servicing, especially at your size. Because every brand should do it, but when you're littler, I think it's easier. As you get bigger, it might be harder. And I think I love this story.
I know what you're talking about. With this woman in London, right, called Trudy, and every year for like 5 years, she'd give us an order of like 20 pairs, and it was a total bitch because it was 20 different people, 20 different packages, 20 different customs forms, 20, and anyway, it was Trudy Styler, who's the wife of Sting, right? Yep. And this time she called me up and she said, Brian, I've just been to a seminar. It's changed my world. I need the most perfect pair of size, whatever, tall sand Ugg boots. And here's where to send them. Do you have a pen? And I go, yeah. She goes, Oprah, care of Oprah Winfrey, Chicago, right? Yes. Well, that was, like, I've noticed when companies took off, right? Nike took off, not because they were Nike, but jogging happened.
Yes.
And they were the leader of the category in running, right? Yes. So Nike got sucked into this billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Then there was another company in Santa Monica with these little white kid leather shoes, and the sport of aerobics takes off, right? Reebok, got dragged into this. They were the leaders of the market of little dance shoes, right? And then I watched, other companies take off.
Lululemon,
But when Oprah got hold of UGG, and it took a couple of years to set up, because we weren't, if she had announced it the first time she got a pair, she immediately bought, pairs for all her staff, like the next day, right?
Yeah.
And then, but if she had announced it, we would never have had the product.
Yeah.
And so it took, that was the year I sold UGG, when that happened.
Yeah.
And it took a year or two. I was consulting with UGG for a couple of years, and that was the time I used to build the infrastructure to where we could announce Oprah,
Yeah. And I mean, so the lesson in there was you just over serviced, your customer. And in this case, someone who was a real pain in the ass, and it kicked off.
What an incredible payback. Yeah. That's karma.
Yeah, I love that. I love your sentiment with that stuff. Brian, if you have time, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
One around the right time to sell a business, and then two, how does someone find their passion? Because I think that's one thing that I get from you over and over again.
Okay.
You're always like, you're clearly insanely passionate about the brand and about the product. So yeah, I love those two.
Yeah, I'll answer the other question first. When's the right time to sell? Well, do you remember I mentioned that I had my van at Malibu?
Yes.
Well, 2 or 3 spaces up was another guy, Doug Otto, and he had these triple-decker thongs, flip-flops. And they were pink, yellow, pink, and his company was called Deckers Corporation, and he had built a business around that, and then he licensed, lightning bolt, and he licensed a whole bunch of surf items. But his big thing was he finally got the license for Teva sandals, Teva. And when the outdoor market took off in the 90s, his business just got sucked in with that, just like Nike and Reebok. And he, his sales were about 60 million at that time.
Wow.
And he ended up going public on the strength of that. So fast forward a few years, he's gone public. I know that he's sitting on $20-30 million of cash. I know his business dies every winter because we died every summer, right? And we had just come off because of the USA Today stuff. We were looking at, we'd just done a $15 million season. And it was looking like it was going to be 20 to 25 the next year. And I'm just going, shit, I have no way to finance that.
Yes.
There's no one in the world who's going to give me money on this increase. They're not going to believe it, right? Because I'd had it happen for so many years, right?
Yes.
So I was on my way in February to the Super Show, which is in Atlanta. It's a huge sporting goods show. And I got into the airport, and way up the other end of baggage claim, I saw Doug Otto. And I just got goosebumps again. And I went, oh my God, it's perfect. And I walked up to him, we high-fived, and we'd always joked about, you should buy me, you can't afford it, And I said, Doug, if ever we're going to do it, now's the time.
Yeah.
And we had the accountants talking to each other that afternoon.
Mm.
And 6 or 7 months later, we did the sale for cash, which was like me cashing out and going public without having to go public.
Yes.
But there's another element to this that I haven't told a lot of people. I was not the right guy to take it into the billions.
Yeah.
Right. I love startups. I love the chaos. I love the uncertainty.
Yeah. I
love the fun. Yeah. I love the mistakes you can make. I love everything to do with startups. But my company after 18 years had got into, where there was, you want to have a decision. Okay, let's call a meeting, and there's 5 people show up at the meeting and you get a decision. You could have made it yourself, right?
Yes.
And, they'd have a meeting on, okay, what are the next colors for next year? And I'm coming in thinking, plum and maybe some forest green and all these colors. And we end up leaving the meeting with gray because everybody can agree to that. That's the least offensive,
Yes.
And, when we're having these inane meetings, I just got so sick of running the company that it was time for me to get out. And so it was tough. But it was like handing off your daughter to a new husband that can go out and start a whole new life.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? It wasn't like I lost my business. I'm still the founder of UGG, and I still walk around looking back to see what labels on the back of their shoes,
Yes.
So I'm still passionate about that, but it's now taken on a new life with and Doug's money was what we used to help propel the production to be able to go to Oprah. And the rest is history after Oprah took it.
It's incredible, Brian. Thank you for that sentiment. And then last one, just how does someone find their passion?
I don't have the answer for that.
Yeah.
I loved Uggs when I was in high school in Australia. They were just the most brilliant product. And I was passionate because the product was so damn good. The number of mistakes I made building that business for 18 years, yet it just kept crumbling along because the product was so damn good.
Yeah. And you loved it. I mean, I can relate. I sold, a number of things and I wasn't really good. And then when I remember I worked for Nike when I was in high school.
Right.
And I was I didn't get commission, but I was one hell of a salesman because I was like, you are an idiot if you don't wear these shoes working out. And it's so yeah, right there I knew if I was going to sell stuff, it was going to be something that I absolutely loved. It sounds like
that is the secret. Passion grows. You don't start out with a passionate idea. You start out with an idea and eventually you become passionate about it.
Yeah, I love that. Brian.
Right. That's how it works.
Brother, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to chat today. There were so many, just what an overwhelmingly great story and message for everyone to hear and myself overly included. So I appreciate you taking the time more than you know and being so flexible. Thank you, Brian.
Well, I'm going to do one more self-serving thing.
Do it. Please. Yeah. Check it out. Tell us about the book.
the birth of a brand.
Yes.
And it's like a roadmap for entrepreneurs. You know, it takes out from the conception right through the day I sold it. And it's just full of philosophy and full of, you know, really good tips on, you know, what happens when you hit a problem.
I'll tell you what, if the first 10 people to leave a review on Brian's podcast, we're going to send a copy of the book we're going to pay for and send it out and get the word out. So I'm going to read it myself. So I appreciate you.
Sure. On Audible. I read it on Audible. So it's good to do.
Oh, it's your voice on Audible too.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Even better. You're going to be in my car. Nice. That's even better. But yeah, that is amazing, brother. I can't wait to read the book. I've overwhelmingly enjoyed minding your conversation before this and then right now too. So thank you for sharing all that wisdom, insight, and learnings with the community.
Well, thanks for having me, Anthony. This was a really good talk. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too, Brian. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate everything. Thanks, Brian. Bye.
Bye.